Hi, everyone. Welcome along to the next edition of our Precursive podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Bethany from Peak AI. Say hi.
Hi everyone. Hi, Jonathan.
I always jump in on people, so always delighted to have new people on the show. Thank you for making the time. Super interesting company. By the way, a business that's grown rapidly, raised quite a bit of funding, and I saw is in the top 100 for small companies to work for. So really interested to learn more about what you do in the business. But let's perhaps begin by maybe, if you don't mind, just giving me a bit of background to yourself, the business that you're working for, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I am currently, as you said, at a company called Peak. We are, and within that, I am the Chief Customer Officer.
Mm-hmm.
We very much believe in being a customer first company. And so although my title is Chief Customer Officer, it is probably broader than what most people think about. So, and also my background isn't maybe traditional Chief Customer Officer background. I lead the entire customer organization at Peak. So that's everybody in marketing, sales, customer success, and our customer delivery teams, which for Peak are our data scientists. Mm-hmm. I've been at Peak for about 2 years, and I started as CRO, building and scaling out our sales organization and our go-to-market, and then have expanded to viewing the entire customer journey, and revenue being the entire life cycle, rather than having these discrete functions. So that's my role at Peak. And I guess the other question was, what does Peak do, or a bit of information about Peak. So we are a AI company, as I said, focusing on businesses that are mid-market and bigger, who are looking at how they put AI at the heart of their organization. So that is, and we primarily focus on retail, CPG, and manufacturing companies, and are looking at delivering quick outcomes very quickly.
Yep.
Silly way of saying it.
Yep.
Outcomes very quickly, and then expanding into other parts of the enterprise, ultimately connecting everything that they do and every decision they make being powered by AI.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about the background noise, everyone. Both Bethany and I have got various builders camped outside each of our houses, as is the way in the new remote realities. So I think, it sounds like a super interesting business, and I would imagine seeing a lot of demand at the moment. So we'll go into that in a moment. But this conversation really has been centered around, I think, some of the emerging themes coming off the back of businesses operating in a very different reality for both business and society as a whole. And I think one of the things that's kind of emerged from that is that customer success has really kind of risen to the top, right, of the agenda for many organizations. I think for some that are progressive, they really understand its value and its importance. I was talking about this with Adam Joseph from Gainsight, and then in others, though, they're almost regressing, and unfortunately, you see people being furloughed or let go because I don't think they truly understand really its importance, and I think that might come back to hurt them in the future. Given your experience and career, I would imagine you've seen customer success evolve over that period of time. Can you give us a little bit of kind of what's your take on, in this new reality, like the role of customer success, kind of through that lens of what you've also seen before in your career?
Yeah. So I think with SaaS, there've just been so many new disciplines that have entered. So customer success is one of them. Revenue ops would be another one. And they're still quite new, like maximum 10 years. And so the discipline isn't evolved yet. And customer success is looking at many different areas. And also there's a different definition. So it's difficult to recruit customer success, because what my customer success is and yours is very different. And so if you're a customer success professional, you don't really know what they mean when they talk about customer success. And it can be support, it can be onboarding, it can be account management, it can be a surprising one that I see more often than I would expect is using the tool for the customer. So basically a proxy for not having a good UI. And yeah,
yeah.
and you wouldn't think that, but like a lot of SaaS
Yeah.
businesses, that's really what customer success is and like a hybrid professional services role. And depending on how the business is developed, and I'm talking really in a SaaS world, you need a customer success to do possibly all of those, or 1 to 2, maximum 3 of those areas. To frame the discussion today, at Peak, we are focused more on customer success that onboards, does a level of account management, and some consulting. So that's just the frame of probably my reference, rather than necessarily support or being the UI for the customer.
Yeah, it's actually, you highlight something there. It's very diverse, right? It's a very diverse job, and I don't think that's fully appreciated by business as a whole, because if you look at the world of sales and how that's evolved, you can see that the go-to market in sales has kind of been broken down into these different parts, right? So you've got people, the front end, generating demand, BDR teams, SDR teams. Like there's this whole level of complexity that's built up. And in many organizations, for example, like salespeople don't run demos; they have solution engineers to do it. So they're kind of the orchestrators. Whereas CS, I think, in many of the businesses that I speak to, is so diverse. They can be, doing onboarding, doing consulting, doing training, doing renewal, all as a part of that job, or that responsibility evolves over time. How do you think about kind of like what's most important then in that world and that role right
Also,
now?
rather than the activities, if you look at the outcomes, what's
Yep.
most important is retaining and developing customers.
Yep.
And so basically actually making customers successful, hence the
Yep.
title of the job. And in COVID, that's more important than ever in lockdown, because nobody knows what's going on. We've all had to change this new reality very quickly. Customers are reevaluating their strategies, and you need to make sure that you're part of that, because if you're not clearly delivering value and easy to work with, you will be the first to go
Yep. Yep. Okay.
at renewal time when you're looking to save cash and change where the structure of your business.
Yeah, I had Nick Mehta on this show, and that's one of the things that we talked about, was this, just very simply, of like, not just that companies are constantly potentially reevaluating the tools that they use, but they're also constantly reevaluating their own strategies and processes, and how your tool an enabler of that. Does it support the business model? Because in so many organizations now, you've got multiple business models within the same company. I mean, we've got clients that are healthcare diagnostics businesses that have got a software business unit and a professional services organization. You got 3 to 4 business models right there. So again, managing that in customer success can be really exciting, but also really, really challenging. Given what's happened, how did you guys have to adapt to this new environment? I called it the new remote reality, like, in April, but it's just like the world now. So this new world that we all live in, because I'm going to stop calling it the new remote reality from this one onwards. How did you guys have to adjust, and what things did you put in place to kind of deal with the things that were happening?
So in terms of what we did with customers, there were some customers that just furloughed their entire businesses. And so there's very little point working with us at that moment, because there was no business in place anymore. And so we did offer pauses to customers that needed a pause because they had mothballed their businesses, and then had a staged approach back to help them. And so that bought a lot of loyalty from customers, because we were able to do that. We didn't offer it to everybody, but in those exceptional circumstances. We also really helped and overserved certain customers that needed to make these strategic decisions you're talking about. So help them with analysis, help them understand their business, see opportunities, make some decisions. So that was maybe something that we wouldn't normally do, but because we have those skills, again, we were able to build relationships by over servicing certain customers.
Mm-hmm.
We did that very knowingly. We
Yep.
looked at all of our customers, and worst case scenario, if we lose half of them, which are the half that we absolutely have to retain, and which are the ones that we could lose if we had to, or how can we maintain those relationships? And we actually came out of lockdown having lost none of our customers,
Mm-hmm.
and upsell considerably. So that investment in customers really worked for us.
Mm.
In terms of internally, what we did is we just have so many more meetings. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It just seems to be a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking at my calendar for October and it's already full. And I was like, I'm not actually that well organized. And it's just like all standing meetings because of how do you communicate in this new reality?
Yeah.
And that's the way that we're working. I don't know if it's the best way, but it seems to be working for us right now.
Yeah.
It's just massive over communication and trying to work together as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just across the board. We work with actives that we have, and you need that clarity when you're so far apart. And then in customer success specifically, it's an absolute one, get closer to customers than we've ever gotten before, so we can understand what they need help with now. And secondly, how can we be more interesting than anyone else? So instead of having because our kickoffs used to be really cool in person, now you do a kickoff on Zoom, it's a bit flat.
Yeah.
So we send out gift boxes before the kickoff. We have icebreakers. We just try and make it a little bit more interesting, that somebody can remember what it's like to work with Peak, rather than just being their fourth Zoom call of the day.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like Zoom overload. There's definitely meetings overload as a result of that. I mean, I've been very actively encouraging people in our organization to like dial into stuff, like use your phone. I mean, I'm from a different generation where we used to call people, or and not have video calls. So I think taking simple steps to really allow the individuals to decide how they, like, do they really need to have their face on a screen? I think it's unless you spend a lot of your morning talking to yourself in the mirror, it's quite unnatural having conversations where you can see yourself back, right?
Well, I'll give you a helpful hint on that one then, which is basically, if you click on your picture, it has hide self view.
Oh, here we go.
And then you don't see yourself anymore.
Oh, bingo. Done.
And so I did that about 3 months ago. I have no idea what I look like anymore, but you don't in real life either. And that is how I do every one of my Zoom calls.
It's not working for me right now on this podcast. It must be because we were recording, and they need to see me.
Switch your view where it says like gallery or speaker view.
Oh, there we go. Oh, Bethany, you've changed my world. Amazing. Great.
Top tip of the day. Yeah.
There we go, everyone. Productive tip of the day. If you hate looking at yourself, or you don't know whether you're supposed to be looking at who you're talking to or yourself, there we go. Love it. So I think we as leaders, right, in this environment have more of a responsibility now, I think, to our teams and our businesses and our customers than we have in the past, right? I mean, you've always got a level of responsibility and duty of care and customer centricity that you need to promote. But I think that's very much risen to the top, right? Like, so, and I know you're very passionate about leadership. So as this all has evolved, how have you thought about your role as leadership internally with your team in this environment? Tell us a little bit about kind of how you think through things there.
Yeah. So I do think that leadership and being an authentic leader is immensely important. And part of it is just great that we're now at a point in society where we have the time to worry about mental health, and that kind of the luxury of it. So how I work with my team, and also this is the first time that I have a truly cross-functional team, rather than it just working with sales and marketing, we all have a common goal, whereas now we have to expand it as to what is our ultimate common goal as a customer organization. And so we're all aligned on ultimately ending the year on the same ARR number. So everything that marketing does that, everything that sales does, make sure we retain customers and grow them. But there are a lot of different personalities and a lot of different views of the world. And so what we had to do is build trust within the organization. And I started my new role in January. So we had 2 months of knowing each other in real life and then flipped to Zoom. And so I've actually been leading a team via Zoom and bonding and becoming productive in a totally different way than we've ever had to do it before, which is, for me, has worked out really well. And I know for others, it's a struggle. I quite like being on calls because I like being able to see everybody's faces rather than peripheral vision. And I become very aware of who has and hasn't spoken. And so like inviting people into the conversation. So for me, it's actually really helped. But that's a bit of a side note. What we're doing as a team, and maybe why my calendar is absolutely full, is once a month we set aside 3 hours to work on the team as a team, rather than how are we achieving OKRs? What are we doing next? What are the issues, ragging accounts? We sit together. When we first started working, we all agreed, what is the purpose of the team? What are our shared values? What are our expected behaviors? And we revisit this once a month if there are any issues. And then we also work on, I'm a fan of Lencioni, so a lot of the 5 dysfunctions of the team. So how do we build more trust? How do we have a more vulnerable environment? And then from that, encourage more conflict and faster decision making. And it's just been a real privilege to be part of it and witness a team truly coming together and supporting each other, and how productive it becomes, because we all now know that we have a shared set of goals, a shared set of values. And if we see things in a different way, it doesn't make anybody worse than somebody else. It's just their viewpoint. And so coming from this world of respect and trust, we're able to have much more effective discussions than we were previously.
Okay. I want to explore a few of these things because this is also an area I'm very passionate about. So I think one of the things that I've observed is that companies' values are really being tested, right? Because you can't fake culture, right? You can't just put a load of words on a wall on a poster and then it's actually true. You have to, I don't think companies fully appreciate it. You really have to work at it. And I use our values to inform my decision making. And actually, when I get things wrong, I go back to the values and I say, how could I have used those to better inform what I did? And I sometimes write about it. So I'll like put out a note on Slack to everybody or send an email saying, this was the situation and this is how I used the values and this is how it worked. Or in this example, this is how it didn't work. And one of those is for us is assume good faith. And it's one of the values that is most liked by people internally. And I think it binds us together, which is when you're working in this virtual environment, you are sometimes at the behest of the written word, right? And it's very easy to be misinterpreted over Slack or over email or, over chat or whatever it is. So by sort of grounding our team in like, let's agree that no one is an idiot here. Like we have a no, pardon my French, we have a no dickhead policy when we hire people, right? So we're trying to weed out people with ego. So therefore everyone in the business is very solid, is very customer focused, is not out for themselves. They're focused on growing the business and working with our clients. They're also grounded in like, assume that your colleagues are trying to help you, not hurt you. They're trying to grow. They're trying to grow with their customers. So I think that value system, I've noticed that we sort of really focused in on a handful of those. And I guess I'm curious to know, when you bring people together and you agree on the shared values that you talked about, do people gravitate towards certain things, or are they, saying, yeah, everything's relevant? What tends to happen in with you guys?
So we have company values, and we hire to those, and we also run performance reviews in reference to them. So the values, again, are very much embedded. So when we talk about shared values, we start with the company ones. and then agree the definitions, or what does that mean in context of our team, because ours are open, straightforward, curious, smart, driven, and responsible. And so they're all words that could have multiple meanings. So it's about what does responsible mean in the context of this environment. And so the ones that are coming up most, open and straightforward, definitely, because in this environment, you have to be able to talk about things. To your point of everything, it's so much easier to misinterpret what you mean or what you think somebody means and how your message lands. Over communicating and being very clear in how you communicate is essential. And also being brave enough to say, my feelings are hurt because I think you did X, and the other person's like, that's not at all what I intended, and be able to have those conversations. It just clears the air so much faster. And you have to do that when you're remote, because everybody goes away and freaks out before the next call that you don't do when you're in the office.
I think some of these are very similar to ours. Certainly the straightforward, the curious, the open. We believe a lot in teaching, right? So in teaching our customers things and how to think differently about things. I think, though, that constructive tension is something which can be a positive thing, as in, I sometimes think that, we all want to keep everybody happy. And I've noticed that when we were a startup, I was trying to do that across all the different departments, and it didn't work in the end, because I was trying to be everyone's friend. And then when someone didn't do something as they should have done, and I come down hard on them, and you're like, we all get angry or pent up at certain points. We let some of our emotions out. And that's really jarring then at that point, because it's so different to what they've experienced before. And I think we were talking beforehand about this kind of this vulnerability, right? And showing vulnerability as I think people and leaders. How do you think about, I've called it constructive tension. You could call it that kind of like, oh shit moment that you have internally, where it's like, you're really going at loggerheads. How do you manage that and help people to understand, like, I might be giving you a hard time now. That doesn't mean I don't like you, I don't respect you, but you've got to be pulled up on stuff. How do you navigate that type of a conversation?
So I think that's where the values come into play. So everything is framed within that. So like driven, part of that is about being great, not good. So if somebody produces content that doesn't fit that expectation, and there is a clear expectation that everything that we show customers is great, not good. We can have that conversation there and then, which is different to constructive tension, which I think is like those debates that I was talking about, when you have trust and so you can actually say what you mean, versus you might be nice to people, but you still have a very high bar, and we still know that we're striving for excellence as an organization, and we're hiring people who also have that drive for excellence.
Okay. Now we talked about beforehand a little bit about vulnerability, right? So tell us, I know again this is an area which you're interested in, so tell us a little bit about that. What is it to be vulnerable? What are we talking about there? And it sounds emotive, certainly. So help us understand a bit more there.
Yeah. So I've gone through an immense journey on becoming more vulnerable, and it's something that I'm really passionate about because it's fundamentally changed my perception of myself and my level of happiness. So I would like to encourage and guide people through this, rather than saying, oh, well, you need to be vulnerable. And if you're interested in how to become more vulnerable, Brené Brown is still just the best authority. And I can't remember her book. We'll maybe have to add it into the links afterwards, which specific Brené Brown one it is. That talks about taking something that you perceive as quite shameful and being brave enough to just share it with somebody you trust. And knowing that they're not going to laugh at you, make fun of you, judge you, and will just be there to support you and listen. And as soon as you make that first step with somebody safe and you feel that heaviness leave, you can start to try a little bit more and a little bit more until you're able to be vulnerable in the way you run your life and your interactions with everybody. So for me, some of those examples is like, I now quite openly speak about the fact that I had 5 years of therapy and it changed my life. And I'm a massive advocate for therapy. And I think that we need to talk about it and not be ashamed of it. And people now talk about it more than they used to, but I want to talk about it every single day. So everybody knows. And if they need help, you need help, and it's absolutely fine. And then I'll also now talk about my feelings. And often people are quite willing to talk about happy feelings, but they're very unwilling to talk about how we label as like bad feelings. Because it's like anger is bad, sadness is bad. And so we don't tend to share those ones. We only tend to share when we're happy or we're excited or we're pleased. And so I've had this example just the last couple of days. We've had something going on at work that's made me very angry, and more angry, I think, as a leader than I have ever been. And I have not been able to let it go, because normally you vent and you're angry and you fix it. But it just keeps coming back. And so I'm not walking around telling everybody in my team I'm angry, but like everyone in my extended team, but in my closer team of the people who deal with me every day, I have to say, I'm still really angry. I can't let it go. I'm going to be short in this conversation. If you can't handle the fact that I'm going to be short, maybe we should reschedule. If you can handle that I'm being short, but it has nothing to do with you, and it's just because I can't get past this. And I frame that conversation. I'm very open with how I'm feeling. And so that also means that people can be open with how they're feeling. And again, this clarity of communication. I'm not cross at them. I just have this bit of anger that I'm desperately trying to shift.
I love this conversation already. There's several things there that I want to. This is obviously not what, guys, for those listening, this is not what we plan to talk about, but we're going to talk about it. So I think it's very healthy of you to share that piece around therapy. My father passed away when I was very young, and I had some post-traumatic stress for a number of years that I didn't realize because I was very young. And I finally went to see a therapist at the advice of someone, and kind of went through that process probably for about a year, and it helped me hugely. So I think anyone out there who is struggling with any mental health issues, I highly recommend, seeing some experts, or if you have friends that have gone through similar things, get some guidance from them on who they spoke to. It should be talked about more often. It is healthy to speak about it, and because I think the mental stress that people put themselves under is massive, particularly in business, because anyone who wants to be successful, the internal pressure and the mechanism, the range of things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis means your brain is going tick, 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 like that all the time. And so you mentioning that example of like being angry of something and like carrying it around with you, I know exactly what you're talking about. I do this, so I'll tell you what I do. So I have the conversation with the person. This is when we're talking about Zoom, talking to yourself. This is the one time I do talk in the mirror. So I go into a room and I have the conversation with the person in the mirror to myself, and I say exactly what I'm feeling, and I do my swearing and all the things that, the stuff that I want to say. And then I sort of reflect on it, and I think to myself, how are they going to react? What are they going to react? Is this going to actually make me feel better? Is it going to make them feel worse? Is it going to exacerbate the situation? And what I've learned is I try to deal with it in stages. So what I do now is I say upfront about something, I'm not happy with this, and you need to realize the reasons why. But what I've learned to do is now bring this into sort of, if it's someone that I directly manage, I bring it into like the month. We have a monthly one-on-one, and that monthly one-on-one is not about your pipeline, NRR, whatever it might be. It's about them as people in the business. And so for this particular person might be one of the things that I bring in to that conversation, so that it's really explicit that we're coming back to it. And it's like, that thing that you did 2 weeks ago, I haven't forgotten about that. And this is how seriously I take it, because I'm raising it as agenda item number one. And I think in doing that, you might look to yourself a bit crazy about talking to yourself in the mirror. But what I've come to learn is I've realized that anger makes me, like, getting it all out to myself makes me feel a lot better. And then when I have the conversation with them, it's a lot more reasonable. Do you know what I mean? So that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I tend to rant at my husband. He is my mirror. And I write in my journal, and between those two can get
Yeah.
past it before having that conversation again. But
Shout
this
out to
one is
Mr.
just
Ayers
like,
then.
yeah, definitely. Whereas this one, I'm just really struggling to shift. So I'm just like running, writing,
Yeah.
ranting, and one day I'll be less outraged.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to some items really around the customer journey. So, because I think we could spend a lot of time talking about the human elements, but I think that that's part of what I want to talk about in this customer journey, because there's something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is that I think you're, I think, uniquely positioned to talk about this because you've run a sales organization. And now, which actually is quite unusual in my experience, for people to move from running that organization to having everything, which I think is great. But one of the things I think you would have seen is that sales cycles are getting more complicated. In many cases, they're extending, right? Even for like smaller pieces of business, there's more scrutiny. And I think there's an underappreciated thing, which is that customer journey starts in that pre-sale experience, right? And that one of the things that's underappreciated by businesses is that if the customer has gone through a quite a long sales cycle to find the thing that they're buying, let's say it's 6 months, and maybe they thought they started experiencing the problem 3 months before that. So they're now 9 months from when they realized they had this issue and they want to do something about it. Basically, when they sign the contract is kind of when they want to get the product, right? It's
Yeah.
like they want it. They would love to get it then. But then, I mean, we just got sent something from a prospective client where it's 190 days from that point to when they get the thing. And it's like, oh my goodness, like that's basically a year from this. So that pre-sale and post-sale onboarding is kind of that, for me, is one of the first steps in that customer journey. Obviously, you could argue it begins beforehand. Why is that initial phase so critical to, in your opinion, to the overall long-term health of that relationship and that with that customer?
Because it's that mark that they'll come back to.
Yeah.
So generally within sales, you'll look at how people map the emotive response.
Yep.
So you're excited to begin with, then you get a bit worried, you do the evaluation, you see all the reasons why you don't like it, then you make a decision, you're on a high.
Yep.
You sign the contract and pretty much immediately get buyer's remorse because you're like, have I done the right thing? My neck's on the line. What's going on?
Yep.
And that happiness level already drops regardless of anything that you do, because your customer is suddenly like, am I going to get fired because I just signed this contract?
Yep.
And is it going to deliver everything? And remembers all of those concerns they had to begin with. And so in that kickoff, you're not just trying to maintain a high and keep going. You're actually going from the buyer's remorse moment back up to a good relationship, which is why we focus so much on the kickoff and making that a special time, because that's what people are going to remember and stick with you through the highs and lows of the experience of onboarding and waiting to see value and outcome.
Yep.
And so what we also do is focus on delivering benefits and value and have that clearly articulated for the entire 190 days, let's say for yours. So like, this is what
it wasn't for us, it was for someone else.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this is the value you get on day one. This is what you're going to expect in month one. This is how we're going to act together. And what I always am talking to my team about is imagine. So I'm also a massive fan of empathy, and going through therapy and understanding who you are and being authentic means you can have empathy. So imagine you are your number one stakeholder and you're going to have to go to the CFO and explain why you've just spent £60,000.
Yep.
What are you going to say?
Yep.
And people are like, and so this is part of why everything that we do is excellent and great that we deliver, so that we have ready-made for our stakeholder. If they get called up unexpectedly about what is it that Peak's been delivering, they have a ready-made slide with everything we've delivered, all of the benefits, all of the outcomes, and who's using it, and the benefit and the value that it's delivered, so that nobody's going to lose their job by buying Peak.
Yep. Yeah. I think imagine is a very powerful word in coaching. And I was just going back to your values, thinking about like, it's kind of a combination of like creative is one of ours. So, like that smart and curious combined is like, put yourself in the shoes of this person that's just bought this thing. What are they going to say? What's the first thing out of their mouth they're going to say? What's the altitude of that discussion?
Yeah.
I think I just want to go back to a point that I was making of, do you think enough organizations are looking at that pre-sale journey and specifically looking at the amount of time that it takes to inform how they onboard the customer? So in an example, you sell two 60K deals. Actually, what you've sold is basically the same, but one took 90 days to convert and one took 120 days to convert. My argument is you need to think differently about that onboarding because of the amount of time that it's spent in pre-sales. What do you think about that, Beth?
Definitely, because the person who's spent twice as long expects you to understand their business through that sales process in such a way. So
Yep.
that goes to being tied up between sales, pre-sales, and post-sales.
Mm-hmm.
You should not. You should do nothing with a customer after they've signed a contract that makes them feel like you haven't listened beforehand.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
They should never have to answer the same question twice.
Yep. Seamless transitions, we call it. They had this image of like a vinyl record going round and round. The name of the track is seamless transitions, because repeating yourself is the worst thing, right? Is as a customer, it's like, I spent 6 months with this person over here. Now I'm saying exactly the same things to this person over here. I do think, though, that in the example that I gave, where you got a 6-month sales cycle, actually what they could have talked about in the first 3 months and what they could have talked about in the second 3 months could in fact have changed, particularly in this environment, right? So I think that there's almost a nuance or a sophistication to it, which is like, let me confirm what I know, right? So this is what I understand in terms of what your growth objectives are, what's blocking you getting there, and then how this feeds into that. Have we captured that correctly? Would you like to add to that? And I think now there's also the, has anything changed, right? Given the changing dynamics of business, is like, has that evolved, right? Because that's really where you're going to need to capture that nuance, maybe post-sale, because they might go, well, you know what, we thought X, right? But we now know Y, right?
Yeah. But understanding the context in which why exists is essential.
Yeah.
Rather than it just being a brand new conversation.
So if you're with your team, then, you talk about this, imagine, put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Like, let's look at some of those practical tips that you give to your team. That one there, like, is I think, like, one of the number one things that everyone should be coaching in their teams, like that customer acumen, that business acumen, that imagination. Give us an example of like one or two practical tips beyond that you give to your team, or that you would advise CSMs or services teams, or implementation managers that might be listening to this.
What are my
Okay.
it's a slightly different question, so I'm not sure if I'm entirely prepared for this one.
Oh, no, all right. So sorry. let me, like, what would one or two tips be for your CSMs then to drive mutual success for them and their customers? Let me ask it a better way.
So for me, empathy is an absolute part of it.
Yep.
And as you can already tell, I care a lot about great outputs. So clear to understand, concise writing.
Yep.
Use their language, not our language.
Yep.
And always remind everyone of the vision, remind everyone of the expected outcome and why we're doing it. So that you're framing every single conversation and not assuming that everybody's going to remember, because although they might be the most important person for our team, chances are peak is not the only thing that that our customers are thinking about.
Great. I think that's very important, right? It's like having that appreciation that you're not project one of one, you're project one of maybe 10, 20, maybe even 30 things. That's great. Okay, going to finish up with then, if you could go back, what piece of advice would you give yourself earlier in your career?
To get a mentor. So my career really took off when I stumbled across a mentor. Didn't realize at the time that's what she was. In retrospect, it's entirely what she was. And so find them early, find multiple ones. that fit the right stages of your career, and
Mm-hmm.
get somebody. And a mentor isn't a coach. A mentor is not like somebody who's nice to you and says that you're doing a good job. It's somebody in your organization or in the organization that you want to be in who has power, who can help guide you and get you onto the right track to fast track your career.
Great. That makes me very happy, because I've been taking on the responsibility with our CS team to get them mentors themselves. One of them came to me and said, hey, I found this person, I want to be my mentor. I was like, that's amazing. I said, I'm also going to get you 3 others. Because I think one of the unique things about the CS community, less so about the sales community, I think it's there, but there's pockets of it. But certainly the CS community, there is a community. There's a community of helping not just your customers, but your peers. So I think that's great. So I'm going to try and summarize, because I've been getting some advice from the CS community on how to run these podcasts better. Because as everyone knows, I'm a bit of an amateur when it comes to it. Like, I jump in and ask people their names and just get them to say hi right up front. But I think a few of the key things that people can take away from this that I want to zero in on. So I think the way that you manage that interaction authentically with your team around agreeing the shared values and some of the expected outcomes, and then revisiting that, is a very useful piece of guidance for other teams. I think having that great, not good mindset, right, of everything that we present to the customer really should be great. And I again, totally agree with that. I think it takes time to get there. And you need to give people maybe the tools to help them understand what great looks like, right? So they have a frame of reference. I think the emotional importance of the kickoff, right? For those listening, that is like the most important moment in the journey. You have one chance to make a good impression, unless it's on a sales call. That's a little inward reference for me and my guest here. And then I think the other things here that have come up is around getting back to the vision. So recentering on the vision. So this is guidance for any CSMs. Make sure you come back and validate that vision with your customer, and be able to reference that and speak to that in the language of the customer. Be very clear on the outcomes you're trying to drive, but be concise about it. And that will overall help you to frame those conversations, I think, in a very scalable and repeatable way, and have empathy wrap that together.
Perfect.
There we go. All right, good. Love it. Thank you ever so much for joining us on what is a very hot day. We can all go and open our windows now and let the world in. Thanks, Bethany.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye.